For lesson 5, we're going to be applying textures to the shaker table and creating a scale drawing that we can print out. So in order to get textures, on the ribbon above, click onto the Render menu, and if you click on the Material Browser icon, the material should load up. It might take a moment, and we're going to turn the materials and textures on. Now the nice thing is there are hundreds of textures, but we want to narrow this down to woods, and you can really do whatever you want here and try the textures that you want. But if I type in wood, I get a lot of woods here, and they're obviously here alphabetically. So cherry, maple, I'm just going to use some of these here that are easiest to select. And so some of the nice features are applying these by layers. So I've already played with these layers, that's why you see them on the left here, but I'm going to go ahead and click onto the Androba. It just happens to be one of the first ones here, and we'll see it on the left. So after you apply them, they'll be here in this window. So you can also just simply drag it right on, and it may not appear the first time, so you need to play around with the window, conceptual or realistic or shaded, and play around with it until you get it to work. So this Androba Natural works very well, and I don't have to change the scale of it at all. So when you look at a lot of animated movies, typically they will have their own textures, where video games may be more photographs that they just drag and drop on there. So these are actual textures, so they work with the shaders and the lights. Alright, so I have applied the Androba Natural to all my layers here. And again, you can spend a lot of time, and there are people who actually just do this for a living, applying textures, but here we're just going to throw some on very quickly. And you can see here in the 3D visualization, I could change this if I wanted to, but for the sake of time here, we're going to move on. So it's fun to play with the textures. You could spend hours and days actually doing this. Inspect it, make sure that everything has a texture on it to your liking, and you can look at it in perspective. And if you are moving it around with just one item selected, like I was just doing with the top, that's the only thing that's going to show. So you want to deselect everything and move around. I'm using the orbit, and perspective is nice because it gives it some depth. Now the grain would actually never go this way on a table leg, because it would just shear off very easily. The grain would be actually going the opposite axis here. So when I render this, you want to make sure that you render this to a higher resolution. So this is 1024 by 6 by 768, and then click on the render, and the teapot is a pretty standard icon for rendering. And render. We've not added lights, we've not added a floor, we haven't done anything here. So it's very primitive, but it's also just a nice quick visualization. And then when you want to save this, obviously you can save this in whatever format as a JPEG. PNGs are great because they can maintain the alpha channel, which is an invisible channel. You don't really need to worry about that right now, but PNG is a pretty standard on the internet also, and it's a easy file to drag into different applications. Alright, so we're saving this image, and so it's in your hard drive somewhere, and make sure you have a copy of that. And then go to the layout, and again, this is great because you can work on and add dimensions, and let's delete it without actually touching the model itself. So we'll go to Annotate Table, and make sure that yours resembles mine, columns and rows, and I'm going to put this on the left corner here on the bottom. And this is very basic here. We're just going to put name, date, and scale. So name, colon, and then the scale. And the nice thing about the software here, AutoCAD, is that it will scale it for us. So then we're going to find the viewports, which will create the scaled drawing. And so in the layout you can either hit the named and you'll see the 4 equal here, or in the command line below type in viewports, RTS, enter, and then the same thing will appear. And we're going to go to 4 equal, and the setup should be 3D, and then each one of these you can go ahead and change. So the top, front, and right should be hidden, and the top can be realistic. And make sure the setup is 3D on the left, and then push OK. And then we're going to just drag this across our paper, line it up, and click it. And you should see the same thing in your window. Now it scales to fit, so it's not to any scale right now. So we're going to select the 3, the top, the front, and the side, and we're going to make this to 1 inch scale. So 1 inch equals 1 foot. And like magic, it does it for you. Saves a lot of time. And we'll type that in the scale in the window here. So we'll type in 1 inch equals 1 foot dash 0 inches. And then let's go ahead and type in text, TXT, and we're going to click where we want to put this, and it's going to go the height. We click, and then the rotation angle is going to be 0, it defaults to 0, and press enter. And then we're going to type in shaker table. This is very basic here, but you can change the font if you want. But shaker table, and then we'll click out of it. If you need to move it because it's too small or whatever, once you select it on the bottom left, there's a little blue icon. You can drag it around. So we're in the paper mode from the bottom, so that means that whatever we do is not going to affect the model. But if you, for example, want to have a different view, click the model icon below, and you can go in the orbit. So if I would delete the leg here, for example, it would delete, but we don't want to do that, obviously. So then in our views here, we can pretty much the same process happens that we were in when we built the table. So I'm in the orbit here, I'm moving around, and I can right click and get a perspective view here. And you'd want to show all 4 legs and the drawer front and the knob. You don't want to hide a leg, just because the idea here is that whoever's looking at this drawing has a understanding of what the table and how it's constructed. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to put some dimensions on this. So we'll go to annotate dimension, and we'll select the linear, and we're going to do some overall dimensions. Now we have the snap done in the settings, so go to the linear, and you can zoom in if you need. We're going to do the back side, and this is 27 inches. By the depth of the table is 24, the width is 27, and then we can zoom in by scrolling in on the mouse, or you can go to the view and just click on there, and we're going to just call this out. It's a 1 inch surface. And again, these are just basic dimensions. So the height, now you always want to on a cylinder go to the center, and this is 27.5 inches tall. And let's go ahead and spec out the height of the leg here, which should be 26.5 inches. So it's really important that things don't overlap. So move the other dimensions, and we're going to actually change the tolerance here, so it's not going to be in thousands of inches. That precision is really not necessary for a table. And then we're going to adjust the dimensions. Just make sure things aren't overlapping. we'll go ahead to the left view here. And this is a little redundant, but that's okay. And so, for example, we could do the support structure here. And we can use the zoom window to zoom in to the areas that we need to, or zoom out. And you can do just the zoom window, and the window will appear, or designate it. So you typically don't want to have the dimension line going over the object if you can avoid it. The nice thing is a lot of these companies where you would supply these drawings would never even look at these, and they would just look at the 3D model itself and get dimensions off of there if they're going to be exporting it to a CNC or something like that. Alright, so let's get the depth of that support. Now, so, however, you would probably want to use this if you were ordering materials. It's just very handy to have something printed out for you. So even in 3D modeling, there is a need for it when you're constructing furniture. And the precision here, we could select them all at one time here within the properties. This is hundredths of inches. And again, these are just general dimensions. And we're rapidly finishing up here. So inspect everything and make sure you have the scale and the date and your name, and you have your textures applied, and that on your 8.5 by 11 page you have the 3D model and the front, the top, and the side view. And you've completed construction of the shaker table with textures and a drawer on separate layers.